Hi, everyone, and welcome to another conversation in the People in Fundraising podcast series. I launched this about 2.5 years ago to highlight and connect with nonprofit professionals in the social impact and related spaces where they can talk about their career journeys as well as successes, lessons learned that they can impart to others in our audience. And today I'm very excited to welcome my first guest from Louisiana, Adrian Owen Jones, to People in Fundraising. Hi, Adrian.
Hi, Tim. Good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. Before we get to your little blurb about your career, which I'm fascinated to hear about, I just want to say that Adrian and I got connected through Catherine Flaatten, who is a former guest of People in Fundraising. And I reached out and said, hey, I need someone from Louisiana. My network isn't super strong in that part of the country. And Catherine wrote back and said, you've got to talk to Adrian. So thank you for saying yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think I shared at the start, fundraising people are my people. I love hearing about what people are doing in the fundraising field, and I love tapping into my own experience and expertise. So I look forward to this conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you. So Adrian, if you could first tell our audience what you do in the social impact fundraising world, and then we'll get into the first question about how you entered the profession, please.
Yeah, so my name is Adrian Owen Jones. I'm a partner here at Success Labs. So we're actually a management consulting firm based out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but we work across the Gulf South and then a few other clients here and there. Um, and we really work with organizations to, build better leaders, better teams, and then better organizations as a whole.
Oh,
And the expertise that I'm bringing to the table is really my robust experience in higher education, in nonprofit, and then most recently the marketing and advertising space as well.
terrific. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. I know we do have a question later on about fundraising strategy and success labs, so I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
If we can rewind the career journey, let's
Sure.
please have you talk here about how you entered this field, please.
Yeah, I'm curious. Have you ever had someone on your show who got into fundraising because they knew they wanted to be a fundraiser?
Um, no, no,
Yeah, I don't
not
know a single person. Yeah.
not deliberately, yes.
Okay. So this is like confirming my theory. One of the things that I'm I used to be an officer in APRA, which is a prospect development organization. And one of the things that we said is, wouldn't it be cool to one day have people who aspire to this career?
Ah,
And I think that speaks to fundraising as a whole, right? Of most people just kind of stumble into it.
yes.
And I'll say I'm no exception. So I went to undergrad for classical studies. I studied ancient Greek and poetry and philosophy, and I was also an artist.
Okay.
I put through school teaching art lessons and making art. And when I graduated, 2008,
Mm.
right as the economy was doing great, great things for the economy. And so I was trying to work as a working artist. I was also a nanny. I was also waiting tables. I was just
Mm.
doing the millennial hustle thing.
Sure.
And patron had seen some of my work and invited me to come be an intern at his private family foundation.
Oh, wow.
So he had an archive, as a big supporter of the arts. Um, I went and I just saw so much opportunity in the work. So it was the Kirkpatrick Family Fund, and they're one of the largest private family foundations in Oklahoma City,
Okay.
which is where I'm from. I'm from
Okay.
Oklahoma. And so doing really incredible work in social impact space around healthcare,
Mm.
um, around animal welfare, around arts.
Mm.
And it was a 3-person team. It was small and mighty, as you can imagine. So we're granting, you know, millions of dollars a year into the community. Um, and so I really oversaw the grants process.
Okay.
I took it all from paper to digital.
Wow.
That experience taught me a ton. And then I moved into the program space. I got to do a ton of programmatic support. We were the backbone organization for an initiative that was trying to eliminate teen pregnancy.
Okay.
Saw tremendous progress in reducing rates of teen pregnancy.
Mm.
We opened multiple museums in the time that I was there. Just did really cool, impactful work.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my first foray into philanthropy, is I got to do the kind of the fun side of giving money away, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But it was really great because I was responsible for capacity building. You know, I came in and I worked with these organizations who had incredible missions, but, you know, they were struggling to make budgets work year over year, or they were coming to us, you know, with really flimsy asks
Mm.
and not effectively articulating the impact of the work that they did. And so I was able to work with them to, here's how you navigate a grants application process. Here's how you articulate impact. You know, here's how
Yeah.
you steward donors. And all of that work really kind of made me a jack of all trades, right?
Yes.
So, you know, as things go, I met a fella. He's from Southern Louisiana, and we were dating, and he decided he wanted to go back to school at LSU. And so after 5 years at the Kirkpatrick Family Fund, we packed up and moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, so he could go back to school. And I got a job at the LSU Foundation.
Mm.
So I was in donor relations, but it became, you know, I always say you can tell the people who really like being frontline fundraisers because they are never in the office. And you can always tell the people who don't
Yeah.
actually like being frontline fundraisers because they're always in a spreadsheet. And
Yes.
I was the latter, right? I was fine at fundraising. I was fine at donor engagement, but what I really liked was the data. And, you know, at the time, the LSU Foundation had no metrics.
Mm.
They had really poor data in their database. It was
Sounds
not
familiar.
it was not a sophisticated organization. Most people might think it would be, but there were about 30 people on staff. It was very, you know, it was very old school. People just got a zip code and just went and found donors, right?
Right.
It was, you know, and so I was able to kind of come in and build some dashboards and start to refine the data, build some kind of more useful tools to track performance and portfolios and all this stuff.
Okay.
And this is around the same time as we were in the silent phase for campaign.
Mm.
And leadership took note of what I was doing and brought me on to lead a massive database revitalization. So I came over, I became a business analyst, and you know, basically built the database as it is. You know, everything from the data schema to all of the dashboards. I helped build the framework for metrics and
Wow.
performance evaluation. All of the kind of reporting guidelines. I worked with a team to develop all new reporting.
Mm.
So really fun. And in the midst of all this, we were working with a consulting firm coming in, helping us. And we had no prospect development arm. We didn't have
Oh.
research, not true research. You know, we didn't have prospect management. We didn't have analytics of any kind.
Mm.
And so just some of the work I was able to do led me to be promoted to build the prospect development function of the organization. So I did that, took it from 2 people to, you know, by the time I left, I was over all of advancement services, which was records, donor relations, and events, IT, analytics, research, prospect management. So it was like everything got kind of lumped under our side.
Sure.
Because we realized like data was what made all this happen, right?
Yeah.
We'd never built up an annual fund. We were able to go from dead last in the SEC to top 3 in the SEC in alumni participation.
Holy cow.
It's a really effective data-driven annual fund that we were able to build from the ground up. So
Awesome.
tons more I could say about that. I helped us launch a $1.5 billion campaign, the first comprehensive campaign that LSU had ever done, and led the effort to do that, built our first national board, a bunch of really cool, impactful work
Yeah.
in the fundraising space. So I was there for 9 years, and then left there, went to a marketing firm, a global marketing agency, which was really cool. I ran that for the past 3 years, and then was kind of trying to decide, do I want to keep doing this? Do I not want to do this? And the opportunity to come to Success Labs presented itself. And this is the work that I really love to do most. And so I took the leap, and this is hopefully where I, stay for the next long haul.
That's fantastic. Wow. I don't know if I've had, I mean, maybe one or two other guests that have had that breadth of oversight that you have had with you. Frontline fundraising, donor relations, events, prospect development, building the database with metrics and reporting and analytics, like such a well-rounded,
Yeah.
cornucopia. It touches every part of development work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's why I like the consulting side, right? Because I have seen the ins and outs. I've been on the front
Yeah.
side, I've been on the back side. One thing that was, I advise a lot of organizations around prospect development nowadays. And I served on, as an officer in APRA and editor of the Connections magazine, which was the APRA magazine back then. And one of the things I was really trying to espouse was a strong partnership between prospect development and frontline fundraising. At LSU, we had it to where metrics were set not by the managers of the fundraisers, but by the prospect development team, and portfolios were built by the prospect development team. And it was
Yeah.
always data driven. It was like, this is the capacity of the portfolio. This is the capacity of activity that you have. And it was not emotional. It was not that, it was really egalitarian, and
Mm.
it built a lot of goodwill and trust, because it was like, our job is to set you up for success. Here's what we
Yeah.
think you can do. Help inform, what are we missing? What are we not? It was
Yeah.
a really collaborative effort that I wish could be replicated in more places.
That's fantastic. Wow. Such a holistic view of development.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear, Adrian, you talked a little bit about Success Labs and your role there, and you've been there for how many months, first of all?
Yeah, so I started the first week of September. So,
Okay.
yeah, a little, like almost 2 months, not quite, a month and a
Yeah.
half, something like
Oh,
that. Yeah.
nice. So congratulations. That sounds like a great new opportunity for you. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about, you mentioned the management piece, the focus of Success Labs, your role there, and how when you posted about this on LinkedIn, that this opportunity gets you back to some fundraising strategy as well. So love to
Yeah.
hear any of those, please.
Yeah. So, like I said, Success Labs is a management consulting firm, organizational development, talent development. I came on Devin, the owner of Success Labs. And this company has been around for 40 years. So really impressive history of working with organizations, large and small, corporate to nonprofit. And, the original focus of the organization was succession planning, and is still a core function of what we do is succession planning. And that, she's putting her money where her mouth is and bringing me on board. And then our other partner, Melissa, the two of us, the idea is that we take this over in the next couple of years.
Wow. Okay.
And so and that's what good succession planning looks like, right? You find capable talent, and you develop them into being ready to take over the reins.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm excited to help other organizations do. And that's one of the biggest gaps that I saw working in the fundraising space, would be organizations where they had a leader for 12 years, and they, or 20 years, over a decade. And, somebody doesn't want to move on. They want to see things through, and it almost becomes a cult of personality, right? And when that leader leaves the organization, it's often left floundering. It's often left with no relationships beyond a handful of board members that have been asked year over year,
Right.
and these critical mission driven organizations falter and flounder. And it's because they don't have the bench strength. Burnout in the nonprofit sector is incredibly high.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to the opportunity to work with high potential organizations to think more intentionally about
Mm.
capacity building within the organization, to think more intentionally about succession planning, to think more intentionally about strategic planning. One of the things that I love to do is strategic plan. And I've had the opportunity to build strategic plans for a number of organizations that highly actionable, and focused on how do we build the capacity of our organization to meet the demands of the future. And, you can put all kinds of lofty goals out there, but if they're not backed by an infrastructure to meet those goals, you're not going to be successful. And so I kind of see Success Labs as an opportunity to really put the bones in place to help organizations thrive and survive. And so that's why I decided to come over here. This is where I think it's the perfect culmination of my experience and my passions.
Yeah. That's beautifully articulated. I think that's so valuable that you have this diversity of hands-on experience that you can now apply to the clients and say, hey, we want to continue the success that your entity has had.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about I think one of everybody's got different talents and skills, right? And there are some things I'm not good at, but there are some things that I think I'm naturally good at. And one of those I think is identifying and developing talent. I've got a knack for it. I was really good at spotting who was going to be a good fundraiser and understanding what motivates a strong fundraiser in a performance-driven culture anyway, and really good at spotting who was going to be effective in donor relations, who was going to be somebody who was really naturally gifted at stewarding relationships. And so I'm excited to help organizations think intentionally about how to see the potential of the talent on their team and think differently about maybe, like I said, I came out of donor relations and I ultimately took over operations, IT, analytics. I have seen, one woman that was on my prospect development team. She was a researcher. I was like, you need to go be a fundraiser. She was just a strategist at heart.
Wow.
And we put her over there, and now she is senior director at LSU. She's kicking butt, taking names. She's been promoted year over year. And that's the stuff that makes me really proud, is being able to see talent, see something in people and cultivate and develop that potential.
Yeah, absolutely. That's got to be very meaningful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Adrian. As I often do in these interviews, we do spend time talking about roles and the mission of the guest's employer. We also talk a little bit about who the fundraiser development person is, whether integrating in professional and personal or just who they are as a person. So the next two questions, I sent them to you ahead of time. I would just love to get any insights you wanted to share about them. So you mentioned you're from Oklahoma and that Baton Rouge area is your adopted hometown now. And you've posted in other places about things you've been involved with in the Baton Rouge area as a volunteer. So I wanted to just give you this quote, and then if you could reflect on how it speaks to you.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear it. So the writer Margaret Wheatley once remarked that, quote, there is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. And so for you, obviously with the practical understanding of how mission critical organizations can impact people's lives, how does that speak to you in terms of what you seek out in trying to improve the Baton Rouge area, please?
Yeah. So when I think about that quote, what I think about is, again, like it comes back to helping others see their potential, a community realizing what they care about. So, some of the things you referenced, me posting about being engaged in my community, at 368, I was able to lead the work that ultimately led to our agency winning a talent attraction campaign for the city. So we built a campaign to attract and retain young people into the city. So net out migration has been really bad. We're losing young talent. And, in preparing for that work and in building kind of the strategy behind that work, we did a ton of interviews and we talked to people across the city. What we realized is, and when we talked to people who had moved here from out of state, and I reflected on my own experience, and what makes this place different from anywhere else, one is absolutely the culture, right? The culture here is incredible. I always say Baton Rouge would be the coolest city in any other state, but people kind of are oblivious to the fact because we've got New Orleans just south of us that's got so much.
Yes.
I've lived a lot of places. We started talking about this at the top, from East Coast to West Coast. And I'm telling you, Southern Louisiana is special. There is a culture unlike any other here. But beyond that, there's community. And community gets thrown around a lot, but Baton Rouge is truly a communal place. It is a place where the norm is gathering. The norm is, the place to be on the weekend is somebody's backyard. It's always somebody's lawn, somebody's backyard. It's the rituals of the city revolve around getting together. We're in football season right now, so every Saturday is kind of spoken for, but the holidays, there's bonfires on the levee, and then there's Mardi Gras, and they even take St. Patrick's Day really seriously, and then there's festival season, and there's a festival every single weekend. There's just a rhythm of life here that is something really special, and I've felt passionate about helping the people here see that and articulate that and find a way to appreciate that differently than they have before. I think that Louisiana is a microcosm for our country in a lot of ways. It is heavily polarized and divided. We've got a very progressive culture and we've got a very conservative culture.
Sure.
We've got cities and we've got really rural areas. We have some of the worst education outcomes, the worst health outcomes, the worst environmental outcomes of anywhere in the country. You name it, we are almost dead last in everything. Okay,
Wow.
so if you can solve the problems here, I believe you can solve the problems anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm just so committed to making this place better than I found it. I think it's going to enrich far more than Louisiana to do so. And I think it's just a cultural mecca that deserves to be preserved and appreciated. And so that for me is why I've dedicated so much time into trying to build community and capacity and culture here in the city and the state.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, and your commitment, your enthusiasm, the passion for that, really shines through. That just I wasn't quite aware, of some of those rankings for Louisiana. But I was really struck by that sentiment that if people can solve the problems there, then they can be solved anywhere.
Yeah, I truly believe that. It's like you think climate change is bad in Florida, we're losing a football field of land more than daily, like more than a field of land a day.
Wow.
We've got insurers are leaving the state. People can't even insure their homes anymore because climate change has gotten so severe. And we can say it's not climate change, whatever, but storms have magically gotten really fierce. Okay, whatever you want to believe, the reality is people can't insure their homes anymore because storms are getting more severe, accelerating rapidly.
Wow.
I talked about it's called Cancer Alley because so many plants are here. So the petrochem industry dominates the state, but that also means that cancer dominates the state. So you care about cancer, come to Louisiana. You care about obesity, come to Louisiana. You care about children. We have some of the worst education outcomes in the country. Most people read at a third grade reading level. Recidivism in the state really high. So it sounds abysmal, right? But to me, it's just opportunity. It truly is because like I said, if you've got everything working against you here and you can make progress, then you've got no excuse to go out and make progress somewhere else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And those very complex and tricky socioeconomic, cultural, educational challenges, they need people to dig in and roll up their sleeves. And I think this may be a broad generalization, but I think, in today's society, one camp doesn't want to hear the other camp's opinion or want their help. So
yeah, I think that's true. I think that's right. There's exceptions that prove the rule, right? But for the most part, that's exactly true.
yeah.
That's where I think nonprofits come into play because it's the government isn't able to work together to solve the problems, for
Yeah.
better or worse. And so who does? The community has to step up and step in. And I don't think it's the way that the world should be, but it's just the way that the world is. I'm such a pragmatist in a lot of ways. So
Yeah.
me, it's an imperative that we build capacity of nonprofit organizations, and we build the fundraising capacity of these organizations to heed the call and really answer some critical challenges.
Yeah.
There's a reason that Mackenzie Scott has invested in multiple nonprofits right here in Baton Rouge, which would probably surprise most people, but it's because, again, if you can solve the problems here, I believe you can solve them anywhere.
Awesome. Awesome. So my final question, Adrian, is sort of a continuation of some of the themes you just talked about, community and gathering and just being involved and building up support. So a few months ago, you posted on LinkedIn about hosting these Jeffersonian dinners.
Yeah.
And I think when you posted about it, I believe you even said that the guests aren't aware of who else is invited to the dinners. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that was so fascinating, and I'm very curious to hear whatever you want to share about that, because it does speak to that. It takes a person to help this community come together and to gather, and so I'd just love to hear whatever you want to share about that, please.
Yeah. So, the idea of Jeffersonian dinners is not new. They go back literally to Thomas Jefferson would host kind of salons. This would be started off as, a little bit of drinking beforehand and then move on to dinner. And there's some kind of ground rules. There's one cohesive conversation. You don't have side conversations. There's a series of question and response. And I attended one when I was in New York for a retreat one time, a women's leadership retreat. And it just struck me how we were able to get to the meat of issues in a really compelling way. I'm somebody that's real bad at small talk, if I'm being honest. And I really like to just, I studied philosophy and poetry, and that's what I'm interested in talking about. And so this kind of was a good pretense, I think, for me having conversations that I was actually interested in. I got really tired of talking about changing diapers and carpool, if I'm being totally candid. So, that's where the idea of doing this was born from. And I think you asked, how do we kind of curate the list or think about who's going to be there? And I really like to have a theme that's a little bit abstract. So, one time the entire guest list was curated based off of all people that are known for asking good questions.
Oh, okay.
Another time, and oftentimes there's a professional tie-in, so that way people feel like there's they trust that there's some benefit to them. Oftentimes it's hard to get people to do things just for the sake of being compelling, so if it feels like there's a benefit. So I always say there's a reason that you're in the room and there's some connection that you have to everyone. One time, one of the connections in the room is everyone was tied to education reform and trying to get better results of education, but they didn't know that. None of them knew each other. And so, sometimes the topics revolve around that and sometimes they don't. But, we always try to just draw out learning about one another as people. Rather than professionals. I don't like the typical networking that's like, so what do you do? So who are your clients? Like I want to talk about what are the problems that you're seeing and how are you solving them and what gets you excited and what keeps you up at night and what are you grateful for and who's helped you in your career and have you told them that? And, some of those just more intimate questions. I like Jeffersonian dinners because they give you the opportunity to ask them. And that vulnerability, I think, makes people closer.
Sure.
Gives people a different level of respect for one another than I think they would if it was just a typical dining situation. So that's what I would say. That's what I would say is they're really born out of a desire for connection more than any meaningful connection with other people. And I want to give people the gift of connection. And so that was kind of the impetus in having them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think there's so much richness in that format. I loved, you mentioned cohesive conversation. There's no sidebar conversations. And
Yeah.
man, yeah, I might need to start those in my own life.
Yeah, I'll send you all the details. Happy to do it, but
Yeah,
um, I
yeah,
think for me, it's about like you've got to kind of feel it out. Have you ever read the book The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker?
I have not.
Cannot recommend it enough. In fact, I say anybody that's in the relationship building business, which all of us technically are, but
Sure.
um, especially you're a host, you are hosting me right now. I think that you would benefit from reading it. I give it to people all the time. It's The Art of
Okay.
Gathering. She worked in the State Department under President Obama. I think she worked under multiple administrations, but she was responsible for peace talks, for state dinners.
Hmm.
She got to, by the temperature of the room and the placement of the chairs, could dictate how the meeting was going to go,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So
Wow.
she talks about radical hosting and the idea of beginning with purpose. Do we want to make this person feel welcome? Do we want to make them feel ill at ease? Do we
Yeah,
want to make them feel on edge? Do we want to make them feel excited? Do we
yeah,
want them to feel peaceful? Do we want them to feel understood? And
sure.
all these little details go into creating and cultivating an experience that evokes those types of feelings. And so
Hmm.
that was also just, something that kind of sparked in my mind is, what if people experienced radical hosting? How would they feel?
Yeah,
That look like? And so I've gotten, I don't know, I'm still working on it. It's still a muscle I'm trying to build, but I think that, my hosting has gotten better as I've practiced it.
mhm.
And I'm grateful for everybody that attends and is open enough to the experience to just go with the flow and enjoy it and be open and vulnerable. And we have great conversations.
That's terrific. That's so good. Yeah, I think for me as a transplant from Massachusetts to Utah, there's, at least in my experience, a lot of people that I know outside of work, their families live generally within a pretty comfortable drive, half hour, 45 minutes. And so a lot of socializing is done just with your family.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Utah used to be heavily Mormon, and it's um, got a lot more of influx of
Mhm.
people from other states that aren't Mormon. And so I think that's changing the dynamic. But I know for like people I know that like me that are Mormon, it's like we do a lot of socializing in the church community. So then when we have free time, we spend it with family typically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I just have felt like in my own sphere, what can I influence? What can I control to have conversation that continues outside of those settings? So,
Yeah. So, I experienced something really similar when I first came to Southern Louisiana.
hmm.
Said that it was welcoming but not inviting
Oh,
because people only invited family to things.
yeah,
It was a place where everybody knows everybody and they're all related in some sort of way. Louisiana is the stickiest state in the country, meaning more people who are born here live here than any other state.
oh wow,
And so it felt that way. It felt like, okay, on weekends, everybody's just hanging with their fam.
yeah,
And if you didn't have that, what do you do?
yeah,
And that was also kind of an impetus for me wanting to build community of my own. I got deeply engaged with the Junior League of Baton Rouge, a women's
mhm,
leadership and development organization, and that helped a lot. But you know, you realize there's literally a loneliness epidemic out there.
totally,
Our the federal government put out guidelines around the threat of loneliness literally killing people,
yes,
not just by suicide, but it shortens your life expectancy to not have community.
yeah,
And so when you think about that, it's like people can seem so happy, seem so connected, but sitting alone on a Friday night or a Saturday night. And
yeah,
so, you know, I don't know, I've got empathy for that. I never want to make assumptions. I would, I want to be an includer for those reasons. And so that's
yeah,
just like another benefit of if you are considering starting them. I think it's a great way to draw in people who maybe transplants like you,
yeah,
who Even if you have family there, it can feel lonely, right?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to definitely check out that book, The Art of Gathering. Thank you for recommending that, Adrian.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
Yeah. And thank you for your time today. This has been such a delightful conversation. We've touched on certainly your career, which is fascinating. And then these last few questions about the importance of gathering and community and connecting with others. I like that phrase too about welcoming but not inviting, and how can we put the emphasis more on welcoming and including. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. You're so welcome, Tim. And thank you for building a community around fundraisers to give them resources and stories and experiences to help them grow and connect and learn. And yeah, you're building community yourself right
Well,
here.
thank you. I'm honored by that. Thank you so much. Well, Adrian, thank you for your time. And for our audience, you'll be able to find Adrian Owen Jones's conversation on LinkedIn, as well as Spotify and Podbean and YouTube in early December of 2024. Thank you all for supporting these posts and these conversations when they go live. And Adrian, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Tim. Have a
Thank
great day.
you. You too. Thank you very much.